Good afternoon. My name is Michael Boyd from the University of Pretoria. Please accept my apologies for not being present in person today, but I'm so pleased to talk through my project, and I look forward to the discussion that's generated when I listen to the recording of the session. This presentation is drawn from my proposed PhD study, which is still very much in its initial stages. The framework of my project is the N4 highway, a road which runs in an east-west direction across South Africa, from the Botswana border to the eastern South African border with Mozambique. I'm focusing on just a portion of the highway, however, the section that travels from Pretoria to the Bilobatse border. The reason for this is twofold. Firstly, the extent of the distance the road travels far exceeds the capacity of a study of this scale, and secondly, on a personal note, it's a road I know well and have travelled many times for various reasons. The study, as I shall explain later, is in part reliant on bringing personal experience and meaning to the highway. First, I would like to provoke your imagination and take you on a journey along the N4 highway from Pretoria to Lobatse. The N1 and the N4 merge on the eastern side of Pretoria and travel together until splitting just north of the city. The N1 continues north and the N4 turns west. At this point, Pretoria Central is already hidden by a range of hills which grows steadily to become the Magaliesberg Range, which the N4 follows in a curve that gently turns northwards. To the driver's left, the Magaliesberg rise and often look like frozen lapping waves, while on the right the land stretches out flat until increasingly large mine shafts and giant chimneys appear, some belching out smoke and fire, reminding one of Mordor from the Lord of the Rings. One of these mines, at the turning to the Pilansberg, is the now infamous Marikana. The road is filled with trucks and alternates between single and double lanes through the journey to Rustenburg, which is nestled within the hills and through which one drives before rising through Magata's Neck near the Bafokeng capital of Phokeng. From here, the road seems to run straight into the distance through thick bushveld until the silhouette church steeple of Swartrugens seemingly always stands over a police roadblock. And the last toll gate of the highway brings you into the Grootmarika district, at the center of which is a hamlet that has tied itself to the legend of Herman Charles Bosman. In fact, he never lived here and never came here, although there is an annual festival dedicated to him and a recreation of the schoolhouse where he taught has been built. 20 kilometers on through the hills with dense veld that seems to be evergreen, and one reaches Zeerust. This is near Bosman country. He speaks of it in his stories, but not quite. The fourth turn to the right in the town on the R49 takes one north over Sefton's Neck, past the ruins of the Tswana stronghold Kadachwene, to where only the foundation of Bosman's schoolhouse still exists in the dry, desolate landscape. But the N4 continues in a westerly direction through Zeerust, into what appears to be even denser vegetation, turnoffs that take one south to Mahikeng until finally reaching the border with Botswana at Lobatse, one of Botswana's ancient settlements. This description, I hope, gives you a sense of the region that I know so well. Although these places along the N4 will be taken into consideration for the project, my initial case study will be that of the connector that brings together these spaces, the N4 highway itself. In particular, my study is concerned with deliberations of form, spatial theories, and debates surrounding material and infrastructure studies. The theoretical basis of the project lies in two studies. The first of these is Caroline Levine's 2015 study, Form's Whole Rhythm Hierarchy Network, which is a novel approach to the study of form, which Levine defines as an arrangement of elements and ordering and patterning and shaping. Levine's argument is that there is an opportunity to broaden our existing definition of form, so that it does not merely lie with aesthetics, but also in the socio-political experience. She draws on the idea that the language of form can be applied outside of the literary and arts, because in essence the work of form is to order and arrange, and this can be applied to the social and political spheres. Her ideas bring together the traditionally separate ideas of social and aesthetic forms to produce, as she calls it, a new formalist method, which is what I propose to achieve in my project. I will, in the initial case study and research for this project, investigate the road as a specific form in its route through the country. This takes into account the conventional perspectives of the road, from the materials from which it is made to the purpose of its construction. The other forms the road encounters, physical geography, people, settlements, and so on, creates conflicts of form. Ostensibly, the road cutting its way through a continent is a dominant form. The materiality of the road collides with other materials. This is the first step, the starting point of my investigation. I will take this even further, and like Levine, argue that if the road is a dominant material form that impacts other material forms, there's an opportunity to explore how this collision creates a series of immaterial forms to activate or become apparent. This will enter the realm of the socio-political and even the aesthetic, such as legal implications of the conflict, personal responses, and narratives told by those affected by the impact of the road. Perhaps the displacement and the loss of belonging felt by a community. Again, this can be expanded, and key to this is the affordances of form suggested by Levine, that each form brings with it a set of affordances, that is, possibilities, potentialities, that are portable and can move between materials as well as between time and space. It is the affordance of form that Levine relies on, the possibilities that one form offers, especially when forced to operate with another form. Levine's argument is embedded in literary studies, and she points to the fact that literary forms are not of the material world that they describe, but there is a relationship, and I am interested in this idea that the immateriality of literature can draw out possibilities within the material world. If we are able to overlap forms, to hold forms up against each other, it may open possibilities of discovery. As Levine says, when forms meet, their collision produces unexpected consequences. If a material road represents a journey through travel and access and direction, then what conclusions might be drawn if it was compared to the aesthetic, to a novel, to a short story, or a poem, with narrative qualities that relate to the idea of a quest or a journey? This can be taken into further detail. Could we find new meanings of the road by holding it up against the form of the paragraph or even the sentence, with ideas and choices and relationships of syntax, diction, and punctuation linked to the progression of a road, through and around physical materials punctuated by towns and petrol stations and toll gates? My proposal is to bring together unlikely forms from which the collision produces unpredictable conclusions and new contestations of ideologies. This applies and expands Levine's idea of intersectional analysis, the overlapping of different forms to arrive at a multitude of possible conclusions. That is, an encountering of literary form with a material or political form can produce new meanings. The result of this is open to many possibilities, but is able to explore how we inhabit the world, as well as understanding that, as Levine suggests, there is a great deal to be learned about power by observing different forms of order as they operate in the world. Examples of this could be an exploration of binary oppositions, hierarchical structures, and the resulting injustices of both. It must be noted that this is not the first study that utilizes Levine's ideas of form, such as Danny Hoffman's successful application of the theory in his exploration of ruined buildings in Monrovia, Liberia, in his 2017 study, Monrovia Modern, Urban Form and Political Imagination. In addition to, and in conjunction with Levine's work, the second study that I will use as the basis of my proposal is that of Henry Lefebvre, in his 1991 study, The Production of Space. In this, Lefebvre explores what he terms the science of space, a study into the concepts surrounding our interaction with space, and particularly that we evoke space. Lefebvre suggests a unitary theory concerning space, that various levels or modes of space exist simultaneously, which he categorizes within the triad of the perceived, the conceived, and the lived. It is a theory that space can operate and be produced as a conceptual as well as physical level. This theory can clearly be linked to the nature of my proposed study. If we for a moment return to Levine and the theory that out of material forms we can activate immaterial forms and subsequent meanings, then Lefebvre's ideas surrounding the production of conceptual space that is directly connected to our experience, imagination, and knowledge can be explored. It can be explored in the spaces where forms collide. Within Lefebvre's work, the idea that the lived space mentioned earlier is of most interest to my project. Lefebvre further defines this as a representational space, which is concerned with the experience one brings to a space. As Lefebvre describes, it overlays physical space, making symbolic use of its objects. Representational space is alive. It speaks. This directly relates to my project in two ways. Not only does it suggest that we bring a series of experiences to any space, which informs and alters that space, but also that this project takes on a personal aspect. Features of representational space, specifically identified by Lefebvre, with examples like childhood memories and dreams, inform and influence my study and experience of the N4 due to my existing relationship with the road. The N4 highway will allow a personal response to these spaces and how they are produced by my own perspectives, which will in turn inform and influence both the outcome and the texture of the project. This is in essence a snapshot of the starting point of my proposed study around form and space. The materiality of the road and its conventional functions is simply the starting point of what the intersection of formal conflicts, as well as the production of space, are able to evoke and realize. A large part of this is the aesthetic form that are activated by the clashing of forms, and I am particularly concerned with the literary constructs that are both resultant, but can also operate alongside the material form of the road, particularly concerning narratives and responses to this conflict. The study is an application of the theory that I am seeking to prove successful, but also to achieve a cohesion between the studies that in turn can produce novel and insightful perspectives of the areas along the N4, as well as to introduce new meanings and possibilities in terms of aesthetic forms and literary studies. This is brought together by the idea that representational space can be produced and observed by the colliding forms of the socio-political world and the aesthetic realm. What I will also suggest is that my own personal experience and history will have a bearing on the outcome of the project through my own selection of form, as well as the space that I am able to evoke. My proposal and aim and hope is that by applying the theories of Lefebvre and Levine, I can investigate the N4 highway beyond its material form and all the ideologies that arise in that sphere, and that, in a sense, I can explore the forces and forms at work that are specific to the N4 to uncover the highway as an immaterial entity of infrastructure. Thank you very much, and I would appreciate any contact if you have any thoughts or ideas surrounding my study. My email is michael.boyd@tux.co.za. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Jacques, for that, for playing that video. And yeah, if there are some amongst us that would like to pose some questions to Mike Boyd, then they can contact him on the email provided. But he did raise some very interesting questions about the representation of space and also the issue of perspective. From which point are you looking at something? And that has different meanings. The next presentation is going to be given by Professor Kienon, and it will be given in French. And we do have translation in this room. And the title of the presentation is The Colonial Architecture of Cote d'Ivoire, a Modern Heritage in Danger to be Safeguarded and Enhanced for Sustainable Development. So over to you, Kienon. I don't seem to see him on the list, but he was connected when we started. Professor Kienon, Timpoko Kienon. It appears that perhaps the network or something might have happened. Can we then move on to the next presentation by Abida and Santi, when reconversation doesn't meet sustainability, case of some abandoned modern ex-colonial architectures in Casablanca. If Professor Kienon comes back, he will present last.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, how are you? So nice to see you.
Yeah,
the floor is yours.
Sorry. Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, and
Okay.
apologies for
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I'm Giovanni Santi, Majda, Abida, Miss Majda, Abida, my colleagues. So thank you to the organized committee for accepting our contribution. We present the synthesis of our research started 2 years ago and still in progress at the National School of Architecture in Marrakesh, and with the Department of Energy Systems, Territory and Construction Engineering of University of Pisa. We have this partnership. The title of this presentation introduces one of the current problems that affects modern architecture. Modern architecture is too young to be a monument and too old to sometimes to respond often to the current needs of a building. And in this context, ex-colonial architecture is an interesting field of study, as it is very often subject to demolition or transformation and misuse. I will share this presentation together with my colleague, Majda Abida. I will leave the speech later for explain much better our case study. We will present a short introduction, and after we present our research method and our results. The most important dangers for this kind of architecture is that often these buildings are identified only with an historical period, the colonialism. And this often makes them difficult to be understood by local population, because they think that it's just only the presence of foreign people. But an architecture represents many values, not only those for which it was built. It also represents an architectural language, the art of building, the research and the evolution of humans in building techniques. So it's something very complex. For a long time, we have studied in École Nationale d'Architecture de Marrakech, the post-colonial architectures of the city of Marrakech. We remember that Morocco, as well as other North African countries, is very rich of this kind of buildings. And specifically, those residential, we studied many residential buildings. After this, we have chosen to shift our attention to special building types, the industrial buildings and the markets, and this kind of special building types. Because one of the most important things to think about this is that these buildings are more vulnerable and subject to be transformed, because the function in this case is easier to change respect to the residential one, where we have in front of us the inhabitants of a house. So it's very difficult to manage. So these kind of buildings are really, really sensible and very, it's a very difficult problem to preserve. And this is very, what we said that we have many examples that shows that modern colonial architecture has often been an opportunity in the past for experimentation from the point of view of the typological aspects, constructive aspects, technological one. And this is one of the reasons that makes them worthy of attention. They are often important examples, as we said before, of the art of buildings. And this is very evident in the industrial architecture. We can see many ex-industrial buildings. They are the examples of the experimentation in the past in terms of constructive solutions, important technical solutions. We have to think, for example, our case study is a market. So we have to think in which way this building tests, for example, important large roofs or free plants without pillars, or good lighting and good system of ventilation to promote the industrial production and the life in the workplace. And our case study, this market that my colleagues, she's going to present in the city of Casablanca, is an important example of model, is a model of a building type application. And we can see in many similar examples. In the center, we see the market in Naples, the fish market in Naples, or the market in Reims in France. The same model, the same building type, the same technical construction solution, reply many times. So I pass now the speech to my colleagues, Majda, Abida.
Thank you. So during this research, we have faced many challenges, such as the lack of documentation, because this type of heritage was considered as a reminder of weakness to our country, or even when we found documentation, we were facing another challenge, which is the fragmentation of the available information. As we can see in the two pictures here, they are the two different graphic representations of the same section of our case study, the building, that are totally different. So we had to manage and find other tools to arrive to our objective, which is first of all, recreating a 3D of the past state of our building as a way to access to heritage, to allow to citizens to, even as recoverers of patrimony, as a way to understand the building. And why not, after all, recreate a 3D map where we work with the GIS technologies and propose it to the authorities as a way to give it to people to explore heritage in another way, to sensibilize them about it. To do so, we had to think of another thing, which is in which way we need to treat these buildings, because in the case of our market, it was a bad reconversion, because when they tried to reconvert the building, it led to another type of approach, which is the distortion of heritage. So how do we decide the good type of reconversion? It is by deciding a recovery guideline to treat this kind of buildings. So the methods we used were the traditional ones, from gathering data to tracing a historical timeline, marking the most important events marking the building, such as the many intervention propositions that happened to its abandoned situation today, to the new proposition by the authorities. coming to the urban evolution of the building, where we try to trace and compare between all the plans and the new ones to see the changements, where it changed from being an industrial area to a new residential administrative service area, to arrive into the micro scale, which is the architectural evolution in which we compare between old photographs taken in different years to see how the building changed during time. All this to be able to retrace all these elements we gathered in a parametric design, which will allow us after to explore the structure, the architectural elements, to understand more the building, as we can see in red, for example, the new parts added during time, and even every element marking the building. To finally represent the current state of the building, in which we try to represent the whole urban situation, because we need to treat the buildings as a urban unit, not as a unique unit, if we can say so. So another way to approach this type of historical buildings was the photo scan part, in which we take many pictures and we try to redraw the 3D model, because the HBIM, the parts where we showed you the 3D recreation, sometimes don't allow us to explore more information about the building, such as for our case here, it was the D case, because the photo scan allowed us more accuracy in terms of exploring some special characteristics of the building. For our results, we managed, by analyzing the building with this type of methods and tools, to arrive to a guideline in which we pass from improving to adding and then to removing. We can say that this kind of tab, in which we improve accessibility, fire escape plans, to add in energy efficiency and thermal insulation and parts removal, all can be generalized to many to many buildings of this type, because they generally all suffer more or less from the same problems and degradations. And of course, it can be more detailed depending on the new reconversion project to propose, but it was most of all a recovery guideline, a general recovery guideline to propose to each of these buildings. The new proposed project was to become of this market a social cultural building. By our analysis of the historical and architectural study, the urban study, the structural study, and the GK analysis, and of course by comparing it with the recovery guideline, we try to see if this is the right project to propose. And at least they respected the urban study, because they haven't shown us the details of the project, but this is a way to see the direction where the project, the new reconversion project, needs to head. Passing to the pros and cons of reconversion, in which we managed during this experience to see that yes, the reconversion allows us to preserve heritage. It allows an economical sustainability, such as even environmental sustainability. And of course, like what happened to our market during the first phase of intervention, there was a difficulty of maintenance. It was clearly showing, and even the rigidity of structure, in which we could see that even the parts added didn't match with the old ones. For so we had to I'll pass to you, Mr. Santi, if you want to.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Majda. So to conclude, we can see how it's important to apply new tools for the knowledge of the building. With the HBIM is possible to give information to the element designed, but especially it's possible to enlarge our knowledge to other buildings, to have a database at the urban level, at the urban scale as well. And this is important for the public administration, for the private. Is important in terms of project, for a new project, but also for the maintenance of the building in the future, because we have surfaces, quantity, volumes, etc. At the same time, each project for this kind of building is important that must to respect the identity, the architectural identity of the building. These kind of buildings, of course, represent a period, but represent something of most important, represent the history of architecture. And this is important to consider in our project in the future. Our research in the next step will going to understand two main factors. Majda, I want to leave to you to come back to our title, to the title of our presentation.
Yes, so coming back to when reconversion doesn't meet sustainability, because as Kalman, we always say a reconversion project is sustainable, but it's not always the case. Why? We can see it, we could see it from our case study. The first thing is that for them, they didn't include the human parameter, because we first of all conceive for human, so we need to consider the well-being of the human being. And for a reconversion project to be sustainable, of course, as we said, we need to consider the human needs changement, because the needs of yesterday aren't the needs of today and won't be the needs of tomorrow. So at least we need to allow a flexibility of adapting to the changement of the human needs. And we need to, of course, to allow new functions capable of being economically self-sustaining, such as and trying to understand more how these buildings affect our, we can say, urban development, economical development, and human development. And especially the last factor will be more detailed in our next steps of the study. Do you need to add something? You want to add something, Mr. Santi?
Thank you for listening, and thank you so much.
Thank you all for your attention. And if you have any kind of question, we are all ears.
Thank you so much for this fascinating talk. And I apologize for misreading one word in your title. For some reason, the document that I have was written reconversation. So I was trying to say, well, I'm not an architect, so maybe it's something which the architects talk about. But then I realized that is reconversion, which then makes a lot of sense. But nevertheless, thank you so much for this fascinating talk. So what we might do is, let me just check one last time if Professor Timpoko Kienon is around. If he is not, then we can engage with some of the issues that you have raised, and also perhaps some of the things coming out of Mike Boyd's contribution. I don't see them on the list of participants. So maybe what I would like to do is to invite all the participants to think about posing questions to our two presenters, and also raising comments, particularly for the first presentation, because Mike is not here to answer it. And also we can take this, if we start with this paper, then we can sort of taper out to consider the general issues. So whilst the room is warming up, I do have some question, perhaps requiring some minor clarification. Is reconversion the same as adaptive reuse?
We can say so, yes. It's quite the same, because to reconversion to be, we need to consider the adaptive reuse of the building, so we can call it a reconversion project. So they are quite linked. not the same 100%, but they are linked to each other.
Oh, okay. So then here's my question.
If I can add a short, something short, it's important in our studies, but especially in many similar examples here in Europe. The most important problem is the economic sustainability of the new function. The new function must be sustainable. I mean, the new function must to respond to many requirements. One important is to guarantee the life of the building in the future. This is important. The life.
That's so. Is that part of what the planning regulations or the environmental regulations say, or is just some code of practice that architects, builders just agree? How do you enforce that the building will, how about if I just say, yeah, well, I will respect the life of the building and do something else? Are there any monitoring protocols? I guess that would be a follow-on question.
For your question, you mean how do we know if the building will live? That's the question.
Compliance. How do you ensure that the people, isn't it that you reconvert the building into or repurpose it into another use, right?
It's I'm sorry, it's by including people in our research, by interviewing people, by passing some simple sheets to people, asking them what in the future, what do you see, how do you see this building, how do you want it to stay, do you want it to change, do you want a public, because for example in our study at first we consulted many administrative like the prefecture, for example, or the urban agency, in which we got the documents about the diagnostic of the area, in which we understood that the area has changed from an industrial area to a residential administrative service area. This parameter, and we even saw the number of equipments in this area, from social equipment to cultural equipment to public equipment to private equipment and all. So we gather all these informations. Of course, we didn't show this in the presentations, but it was included in the research. All of this included also with the humans, the neighbors, the one living just near the building, the ones that don't live near the building. For example, the Association of Architects, who led us to other factors and parameters to consider. All of this to finally see that this place needs an equipment that serves the public and not an equipment for private profit, like because the previous proposition was to have a commercial market which was just for a private profit. It didn't serve people. So this is why the intervention work stopped, because after 7 years of work, it's not easy. It's 7 years of work and all. The authorities decided to stop the work because why? The human factor wasn't included. We didn't ask people what they wanted to be there, what they see themselves looking at in 10 or 20 years.
Okay, no, thank you so much. In fact, I was rude as a chair. I should have opened up, I should have asked the other colleagues to ask their questions before me. But I just thought that was, just an opportunity to warm up the room. And thank you so much for those responses. Colleagues, are there any questions, any comments that you want to raise? Particularly, there are these issues in terms of the importance of awareness, the importance of listening, and the like. If you have a question, because I cannot see the entire screen, can you just unmute yourself and ask? Or if the presenters, if you have other things that you would have wanted to elaborate on, but maybe forgot, or let us also have that in conversation. Any questions? Let's not let them go off lightly.
Thank you so much.
Maybe one last thing, because I was taking some notes in terms of, so yeah, Giovanni, you mentioned this point about the ambiguity of modern architecture, that it is either too young and not too not too old. That's something that I'm just paraphrasing, something that you mentioned at the beginning of your talk. So what does it mean then in terms of protection of this kind of heritage? Does it require people to amend the laws to protect this young heritage? Because there is also the thinking that, you know, heritage is something that must be old. So what we are trying to say is no. Heritage can be of any age. Do you have any thoughts?
Majda, before, she said that it's important, the participation. The design process must to listen the people, to listen the social aspect. Many of very often architects, engineers, designer, we talk about, usually we use the words archistar. Okay, archistar, he or she arrives, she or he doesn't listen the place. So this is important, listen the place. If we listen the place, we can listen the people, we can listen the building. And in which way is possible to preserve? And transform to preserve. This is important. We can say transform to preserve. Sometimes it's necessary to transform, but we must to follow some rules. Local peoples, I think the most important point is that local people must to try to disconnect the link between architecture and the foreign power of a foreign people. This is important. When we think about this, it's easy to understand that we have something with a very high value, because we have a market, we have a cinema, we have a residential building, we have a palace that is not built by French, English, German, Italians, also Italians built in many parts of Africa. We have an example of architecture. This is important, and maybe especially for the tourism, for the economy of that place. We can push the economy of a place with new opportunity for the tourism, because maybe people can come, for example, in Marrakesh, we have many buildings, important buildings in Art Deco, in Rationalist period. So we can begin a new path of a new tourism path. So we can have new opportunities. This is important. And after it's easy to understand in which way I can preserve, in which way I can transform. Because, of course, if it's important, the building is important, I have to preserve the image at least. I hope to be clear.
No, that's fine. That is very useful, and it is also a very fascinating and relevant study that you are doing. So how do we balance between continuity and change, for example? That's always the challenge. We want to hang on to the past, but we want to move on into the future. So how do we then balance that in terms of planning, and also allowing individual creativity, because heritage is also about creativity and so on. But that is also a very good challenge to have. Colleagues in the room, do we have any questions, any comments, or any issues that we would want to raise if I don't see any hands. So thank you so much, colleagues, for this very fascinating study. So I guess we just have to wait for the others to finish, and then we regroup, I think, in 30 minutes or thereabout, so we can stretch, have coffee, and then come back to discuss the Cape Town document and some of these ideas. The reason why I was asking is because this idea of continuity and change and how we deal with it is one of the key points that are in the draft document. So how do we take it? How do we take it forward? So that is something that we are going to need to engage forward, to engage as we go along. And also, it, as you are saying, it has resonance everywhere in the world. So that means that we must find a way of dealing with that. Once again, thank you so much. And yeah, let's see, regroup in about 30 minutes when we go into the next session. Thank you everyone for being part of this discussion. Merci beaucoup.
Merci, au revoir.
Thank you so much.